Welcome to the Linked HR interview series Voices. My name is Chris Wildermuth. I'm a professor at the Adult Learning and Organizational Performance Master's Program at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, and the chief evangelist for Linked HR, a major HR group on LinkedIn with over 500,000 members worldwide. I have the honor today of talking to Margaret Wheatley, an internationally acclaimed speaker and writer. My first introduction to Margaret Wheatley's work was through her incredible book, Leadership and the New Science. This is a must-read for anyone interested in leadership and change and humanity, and has been translated into more than 20 languages, so our members from all over the world would be able to read it. Mag, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today.
I'm glad we have the time to do this.
My first question was, I was, as I said in my introduction, introduced to your work through Leadership and the New Science. And I have been itching to talk to you ever since I read that. And right in the first chapter of the book, you said, I believe that we have only just begun the process of discovering and inventing the new organizational forms that will inhabit the 21st century. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that for our readers, especially for our listeners, especially listeners who have not had the pleasure of reading your book.
Well, this is very timely because I've just been going through Leadership in the New Science, getting ready to write something to commemorate its 20 years of being out in the world. And so one of the things I have noticed is that that book was written from a very different time. Yes, at that time, 20 years ago, it seemed it might be possible to discover the new organizational forms of the 21st century. If it had been true, I'd be a lot happier these days. Those new organizational forms that seemed so healthy and promising were to be organizations that were not nearly as hierarchical, that relied on people's inherent creativity and generosity, where self-organized activities were the rule, where distributed leadership was common, where we understood that we operate in an exquisitely, intimately interconnected world, where chaos is part of the process of creation, if we choose to use that falling apart time to rethink what we want to do and be. It was an organizational form that knew that change was just the way it is, and that could, be in the dance of change and not get taken out by fear and anxiety when change happened. And it was also a vision of not only the intimacy of the world, our systemic connections, but also as a realization of the great diversity of the world, which offers us the gift of multiple perspectives as the only way we could truly comprehend any problem, any situation, to really invite in diverse points of view in order to come up with a true understanding of the complexity of any situation. Well, that was the dream 20 years ago. What has happened in those 20 years is that the world has changed dramatically through globalization, and more so even through the web and the internet. And what I observe everywhere is the breakdown in hierarchy, a insistence that the way you deal with chaotic situations and uncertainty is to clamp down and create more control. So there's been a great rise of command and control leadership, taking power back to the top of organizations, senior executive teams being involved in really petty levels of decision-making, all, I think, under the belief or from the belief that we can control chaos by taking power back to the top. Now, what I observe, I think this is pretty obvious, is that when we try and control chaos, all that we do is create more chaos. But there's also been an overwhelming reliance on numeric measures, trying to understand a complex world through very simplistic measurement. There's been I would say, in decision after decision, disrespect and dishonoring of people, and feeling that people are more than ever replaceable parts. We're not giving credit for experience, for wisdom, for longevity, for loyalty, any of those things. We're making decisions, especially in corporations and governments, on very simple, abstract numeric measures that have nothing to do with the complexity of the situation. And we're also not making decisions based on rationality any longer. I mean, we're so into crisis management mode, and the complexity of our problem requires reflection, learning together, taking time to really see what's the best possible solution here, and that's just not happening. I see that learning with colleagues about what we've just done, whether it was successful or not, learning has just basically evaporated in most organizations because we're so rushed. We have so much to do, and we're basically just becoming very good task processors rather than thoughtful human beings. So when I went back into leadership in the new science, I got, very sobered by realizing that there seemed to be so much promise available in 1990, 91 when I wrote the book. And now the world has really changed in very troubling ways. And I'm actually going to be writing a new book about all of this that will come out next July to commemorate the 20th anniversary.
Oh, I can't wait to read that one. I am right now going through the walk out, walk on.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if some of the experiences that you relate on that book would give you some hope. But again, if I can ask you to talk a little bit about that to the folks who haven't read Walk Out,
Sure.
Walk On, which, by the way, is fantastic.
Well, Walk Out, Walk On is a series of 7, this is the 7 communities that my Institute for Kana has partnered with over the years. And in each case, these are communities in mostly the global south. So in South Africa, Zimbabwe, India, Greece. Greece is becoming part of the global south now, but wasn't when we wrote it. Brazil, Mexico, and Columbus, Ohio, where there have been really interesting explorations of a new form of leadership in many different kinds of organizations there. The whole concept of walk out, walk on is that there are people who choose to walk out of prevailing beliefs or limiting beliefs, and they walk out of a situation, a relationship, a job, or a belief system that they know is limiting their potential, and they walk out so they can walk on, find a place, find ideas, find companions where they can really contribute more and be more creative. And in each of the 7 communities we visit, we're describing work that occurs at the local level, because Margaret Mead was right. Change only happens from small groups of dedicated people. So it's this working at the local level, but then connecting to other folks who are also working at their local level. That's my theory of change. It's what Berkana Institute has worked with for years. And it's an approach to change through local efforts that then connect to one another that hopefully can emerge into something larger and more influential. And that whole process is well described in one of the articles on my website, and all those articles are available for free because I want to spread the ideas and words as far as possible. But there's an article there called The Life Cycle of Emergence that I think it describes this best of all, aside from the book, which is filled with very colorful visits to these different communities. But in every one of those cases, people realize that their old ways of thinking or their old reliance on outside expertise or government help or money, that that wasn't their future. And in some cases, they had actually the great freedom of realizing that no one was coming to help them. And, you know, we still hope for government support, grants, leadership, senior leader allies, and we have a lot of hope in us when we're trying to create change within any large system. And the stories in Walk Out, Walk On are of people who were liberated from hoping that help would arrive. And in being liberated from that, they realized that they could just turn to one another and find the resources they needed, both in themselves, in their traditions, in their cultures, and also in the environment, what they had available in terms of natural resources, or as well as culture and personal creativity. So it's a very compelling set of stories for us because we've seen how wonderful and creative people can be, and therefore what pioneering initiatives really get developed.
And I'm curious, as I'm hearing you talk about some of the stories on Walk Out, Walk On, and also the need for people to work at the local level and connect to others. What relationships could you tie to the same organizations that you said before are in crisis management and control and command? What can those organizations or the members of those organizations perhaps learn from the members of the communities in Walk Out, Walk On?
Well, I think there's a lot to be learned, but the first is whether you can identify yourself as a walkout, in that walkouts seem to have strong intuitions or faint intuitions that more is possible, that the current way of running a department or motivating people or managing people isn't working. And so there is that moment of knowing. I think it's a deep knowing. It's not purely mental. There's a sense of knowing that, to go back to one of my other titles, that a simpler way is possible. And that once you start to have that sense, you're beginning to be a walkout. And then the question is, can you find a few others in your own organization who are also similarly distressed, upset, frustrated, and who also have this very positive feeling that there is a simpler way to organize and to accomplish work. And then you start to work together below the radar. None of this is, or what's not possible here, and this I have had the experience of thousands of people who really created very wonderful innovations within their own organization, and then felt that, well, of course, I will be approved, applauded, respected, touted because I created great impacts, great effects, just like the corporate leaders asked for. And instead what happens to those innovators is they get dismissed, they can get pushed out of the system, or they'll just be ignored and feel invisible. But they never, rarely get brought into decisions and said, you really have done so well, you have something to teach us, please teach us. It's not what happens to innovation within large systems. Large systems have a very strong autoimmune response to innovation, even when the innovation gives them increased profits, new product lines, new capacity. They still seek to just push it aside, ignore it, or in some cases, push the person out as well. In many cases, actually, they push the person out. So if you choose to be a walkout, but you're walking out within an organization, a large system, you have to go looking for the few like-minded others. Some of them will be inside, some of them will be outside, but they're there. And then you just realize you are the small group that Margaret Mead identified, and that you can create change within your sphere of influence, and just be content with that. You know, I'm no longer about thinking we can change whole systems, but I know we can still do very good, meaningful work with our team or with our colleagues, and just be content with that.
So one question that is occurring to me as I hear you say that is, how then would you prepare the leader? What is the role of the leader?
Well, I think our leaders have to be much more courageous, much clearer about why they are leaders. There are far too many leaders who are in it for ego, greed, self-aggrandizement. I've done this work for many years now, that the image of the good leader shifts from being the hero, whether that's the take charge, do what I say hero, or the hero that says, I'm really trying to do good work. I know it's important. I'll just take on more and more of it because no one else is doing it and it needs to get done. That's a kind of heroism also. But to switch from the heroic image of leader to that of host, which is the story of Columbus, Ohio, in Walk Out, Walk On, is described as from hero to host. A host leader understands that his or her function is to invite in and to support people to do the work, not to tell them what the work is, but to engage them. So it's a high engagement approach, and it's a low ego approach as well, where the leader realizes that other people are creative, are self-motivated, are committed, and that the successful organization will be the one that encourages and supports those people to do the work. And then the leader doesn't take all the credit either. So we've had a lot of these wonderful leaders in our midst for years. Many of them now are retiring. I don't know how many host-style leaders are being bred in MBA programs. I fear for that. I think it's much more about leaders' power and personal gain coming out of too many MBA programs. But this is the kind of leadership, by the way, a leadership that encourages others, that helps others see their skills, that helps people stretch and grow and develop. This is the only form of leadership that I have found human beings want and respond well to. It doesn't matter your culture or your age, but I have, for many years, been in this inquiry of, what kind of leadership works best for humans, independent of culture, age, or any differences. And it is this leader as host, the one who invites us in, supports us, stretches us, has great integrity, and really helps us be more than we thought we could be.
The challenge here is, how do we prepare those leaders, or how do we?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is who's going into leadership and why these days. And I think that's a question that we just have to keep. Why are you choosing to get an MBA? Why are you choosing to take on this role right now? because we do know what good leadership is, and I strongly believe that leaders are made, not born. I mean, some people are born with charisma and leadership qualities, but I've worked with thousands of people now who became leaders because they saw an issue that was important to them, and they stepped forward. So they kind of are accidental leaders, but then they work very hard and develop whole skill sets. So I want more people going into leadership because they care about an issue or they care about other people. But what I see is far too many people going into leadership because it's money and power.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to ask you a last question. What hope do you see?
I don't need to be hopeful any longer. I need to be clear about what I think my right work is. And I've written quite a lot on this topic of this place beyond hope and fear. And over again, I realized that the great activists, the people who persevered for the long haul, which is also one of my newest books, just on perseverance, how do we keep going? It's not hope that keeps us going. It's just feeling that what we're doing is important no matter what. So we give it our best shot. We hope, we do hope that, of course, we'll have an impact. But after a while, the work itself is what keeps us going. And in some cases, I'm meeting with numbers of people now who actually don't have hope, but they're still doing the work because it just feels like it's the right work to be doing. And I see this as a very important quality in all of us, that the problem with hope is that it comes with its partner, which is fear or disappointment. So to be free of needing things to change because of your labor also means you're free of disappointment or fear when it doesn't happen. And instead, it's possible, it's not an easy road, of course, but it's possible to just keep doing the work because it feels like I have to do this work. No matter what happens, this, I know, is work that's meaningful to me, that I believe is making a contribution, and I'll just keep going as long as I can. And then you find the others who are also, for support, consolation, fun, black humor about what's going on. I mean, we have to have companions for this journey, for sure. We have to have community of some sort around us. But to be free of optimism, pessimism, hope, and fear, I'm finding that's worthwhile.
Well, Meg, thank you so very much. This has been so fascinating. For one thing, I didn't ask you most of the questions that I had prepared, which just shows you how much you brought me into this conversation. It was fantastic. So thank you so much for talking to me. I really, really appreciated it.
I'm glad we had the time. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.